Okay, so we're talking about the subject of, I actually started by talking about the subject of violence, which the word sounds more physical, right? We're talking about some sort of physical violence. But really, we saw as we're looking through that word, the word violence in the book of Proverbs, talks sometimes about a very physical violence. It can also be used to talk more about just sort of like a violence of words, which we would call a contention, strife, can refer to all of these things. So we've kind of touched on all the different types of division, fighting, contention, whether it be physical or more emotional, verbal, those sort of things. And now we've come to, we've gone through all the problems with it, why to avoid it, and how to avoid it. And now we want to talk about when is it right to get into either physical or verbal or emotional conflicts. When is it right to fight is the question. And there's going to be three categories when it is right, in certain scenarios, it's right to participate in contention and strife. And the three categories I'll give you now, we're not going to get to all three. We're not even going to get halfway through one of them, I'm sure. But the three categories that we'll find in the book of Proverbs are defense, discipline, and justice. So defense, we'll talk about what that means exactly. Discipline, meaning helping someone to learn by some sort of violence or contention or strife that will help them to learn. Or justice. We often in America don't see those two as different because our justice system, we call it the justice system, but we just want to rehabilitate people and put them back out into society. Those are two different things. One of them is discipline, the rehabilitation, helping them learn. Justice is something different. It's giving them justice, what is right, as a response for what they did. That's different than discipline. We'll talk more about that when we get to it. Today we're going to talk about defense and what Proverbs says about defense. Let's start in Proverbs chapter 12. And let's look at a verse in number 6. We have a proverb here that clearly deals with the subject of strife, contention. In number 6 it says, "The words of the wicked are to lie in wait for blood, but the mouth of the upright shall deliver them." So here's defense. The wicked are, and this is interesting, it's the words of the wicked lie in wait for blood. So you have this symbolism where their words, though they're not physical, are related to a physical thing. When someone is lying in wait to ambush somebody on the roadside. It reminds you really of the parable of the Good Samaritan, doesn't it? Where Jesus talked about a man who was ambushed on the side of the road going down from Jerusalem to Jericho by a group of thieves. And the picture is very similar to what we have here. The words of the wicked are like people lying in wait on a roadside to ambush somebody. So you really have both forms of violence kind of in view. Both that physical fighting and contention is in that lying in wait for blood, but the words tells you that this is applicable also just contention with words, fighting back and forth with heated argument. So both of those are in view. So in verse 6 it says, "The words of the wicked are to lie in wait for blood," but what's the response from the mouth of the upright? Well, it's to deliver those who are being attacked by the words of the wicked. So you've got these two things. The wicked are creating contention. The righteous jump into the contention, but they do it for defense, to defend the innocent person in the middle. It's not they want to jump into contention because they just want to be contentious. Oh, there's an opportunity for me to show that I'm right. That's not the point, right? It's to get in and defend the person who's being attacked in that contention. And this just kind of, as you're thinking about the Good Samaritan, right? Imagine if the story, right? The man fell among thieves on the side of the road. He's left for dead. They stole all of his stuff, leave him there on the side of the road. And you have people walking by and they're not helping him, the Levite and the priest. All of that has specific meaning for which Jesus is telling the parable. So that's the real main point of the parable. But we're just going to sort of use it as a thought experiment, even though it's not the point of the parable. Okay, don't think this was why Jesus told the parable. It was about who was your neighbor. That's a different subject, really. But now think about how the Good Samaritan, who was the neighbor to the man who fell among thieves, he came and he took the man, and what did he do? He brought him to an inn where he paid for, he bound him up and put oil on his wounds and brought him to an inn where they could help him, and paid for all of his care. So the Good Samaritan preserved this guy's life. Now, that's what being a neighbor does. The neighbor comes alongside, even a Jew who would hate a Samaritan, and helps them, right? He assists them. And just all you've got to do is now take the parable that Jesus gave about what it is to be a neighbor, right? And now just rewind and play it through and imagine that the Good Samaritan comes upon the man while he's being attacked. What do you think the Good Samaritan's going to do? Oh, can't get involved, it's contention. No, the Good Samaritan's going to say, get out of here. And he's going to jump in to try to defend the man. And he's going to hope, actually, that he probably going to hope he has a sword on him because he's going to be probably not going to be successful. I think it's actually a really good argument for those who carry weapons. I think that's a really good argument for it. As long as it's not used in order to attack somebody, it's used to defend people, right? That's I think what we're seeing here is that there is a use for contention and violence when you're not beginning the assault, you're rather jumping in to defend somebody. What are some thoughts off the top of your head as you're thinking about that parable? If there's none, I'll just move on to the next one. That's fine with me. Okay, well, the next one's going to be in the same theme, so if you're thinking of something, just haven't formulated it as a thought or a question yet, well, you can ask it again at the next one. Let's go to Proverbs 17. This is what happens when Rob isn't here. We don't have any questions. That's Okay, Proverbs 17. We're going to have a very similar. All of these are going to be in the same vein because they're going to be talking about self-defense, not self-defense, defense of a friend, defense of a neighbor. What I would call neighborly defense. That I don't know. I guess maybe I've coined that term. I don't know if I've ever heard that word before. But anyway, it's defense of others because we're to be neighbors to them, right? Proverbs 17, verse 17 says this, a friend loveth at all times. Just pause for a moment and understand that love in the Bible is usually, it's almost never referring to this uncontrollable feeling, right? Oh, I love you. Or, oh, I just don't love you anymore. It's not my fault. I don't love you anymore. It's like, that's not the Bible love, okay? Love is the way that you act towards a person. Are you acting in love towards that person? Are you caring for them above yourself? Is essentially the idea of love. That means that God can command men to love their wives. Well, how is that possible if love is just a feeling that comes on you or leaves you and you can't control it? That's not love. That's not what the love the Bible's talking about. It's something that you choose to do. It's how you choose to act. And so the friend here, a true friend, is going to love at all times. It doesn't really matter how the other person's acting. He's going to continue to act in a loving way towards his friend. And a brother is born, look at this word, for adversity. Well, in what way is a brother born for adversity? He's there that if you get in trouble, he's there to defend you and to jump to your defense. And now, I don't know, there's probably many different family scenarios and situations that are represented among us. But I think one thing that is common among probably at least the majority of people is they recognize that even when usually, again, sometimes you get estranged from your family, your brothers, your sisters, but typically, no matter how annoyed you are with your brothers and sisters, if they were under assault by some person, either verbally or physically, you're there. I mean, like, I'm there to defend them at that point. They might annoy me to death, but I'm going to be there if they're under attack, because a brother is born for adversity. And this kind of talks to us a lot about the right use of jumping in to a contentious scenario if it's to defend an innocent person.
Quite literally, it was the Kelsey situation with the cell phone the other day, was it not?
Kelsey, what is
It's a
that a
football
news story?
player who someone came up and insulted his brother, and he took the man's phone and smacked it on the ground.
Oh, wow. I'd have to know more about that situation before I condone it, but yeah.
Yeah, it's all literal brother was insulted and insulting his brother to his face, and in defense of his brother, he took the man's phone and smashed it.
Yeah. And that's one of the things where you have to, I suppose in a scenario like that, you'd start to ask yourself, okay, what is the right response to verbal attack? Is it physically destroying a phone?
I'm not claiming he's a great person.
Right. Right. But I think the point that you're making is that desire to defend a brother is a good thing. It's a righteous thing. Maybe we still have to keep it in check and be careful how we defend them, but that comes from a place of actual wisdom. Yeah.
I think, too, that we have to be careful about defending somebody, a brother or whatever, to stop the assault as opposed to for an assault.
Yeah, revenge is the wrong so that's good. It's good to keep in mind the other things we've already studied about contention before, which is why we kind of dealt with those first. When if it's just your excuse is, well, I'm defending him, but really you can tell that in your heart, your motive, it really is just angry, revenge, that kind of thing. That's the wrong motive for it. Yeah.
Trying to fight, not fight the crowd, but fight the idea of what the crowd is accepting.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to help other people, and they won't necessarily see it that way.
Yeah.
You need to know both sides, I think you're saying.
I think you're talking about perception, right, and how you're perceived.
Yeah, it's the difficult one with contention. Truly, I do.
Yeah, I agree. But I think you're right. Now, I think also one of the things that you said is that, or maybe you said it, or maybe I just was thinking about it while you were saying stuff, but about someone passing by and thinking this is the case, but not understanding what's going on. That's actually dealt with in a previous, and I don't have my whole list of the Proverbs that we've gone to, but this was dealt with in a previous proverb where we talked about taking the dog by its ears, passing by strife and getting into it without knowing both sides. And while we don't want to be perceived as the bad guys, I don't think that's the thing that matters so much as are we doing what's right for the right reasons. And whether we're perceived as doing what's right for the right reasons is maybe kind of a lesser concern. If we can avoid being perceived wrong, great, but it's not sort of our main concern. It certainly isn't the emphasis of the Proverbs that we've studied so far. Yeah.
My husband's told me this story about a childhood buddy of his, and he was always getting into trouble, but his mother would always say, when the problem was brought to her attention, "Not my Tony."
Right, yeah. I think, so if I can sort of read between the lines here, I think the emphasis of this passage is that it's highlighting the positive nature of coming to the defense of a brother. I don't think that it's commenting on the fact that sometimes you can do that too much, right? You can go too far with that. And that's obviously true. But I think it's holding that up as an ideal, like coming to the defense of a brother is, in general, a wise thing to do. And it's certainly not prohibited. It's one of those places where it's creating a category of here's good times to fight when you're defending a brother. I don't know that it's saying all the times that you fight to defend a brother are the right times, and that, of course, we need wisdom for.
But that would be applicable right now in this voting season.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think there's any contention in our country right now. There's not. Let's do the next one. How about that? Proverbs 24. And if there's another thought that you wanted to share, I'm sure you can share along with this one. This, again, deals with that same day of adversity, kind of. Doesn't say have the exact same words. But look at what it says here in Proverbs 24, verse 10. If thou faint in the day of adversity, notice how before it was the brother is born for adversity. Now, here's what happens in the day of adversity. If you faint, meaning you are not strong enough to stand in the day of adversity, thy strength is small. If you say you're a brother, or you say you're there for somebody, but then when it gets hard, you're gone, what's the point? Well, I don't need you for the good times, I need you for the bad times, right, is the idea. Your strength is small. Verse 11, if thou forbear to deliver, there's that defense, right? If you don't deliver them that are drawn unto death, and those that are ready to be slain. Now this is, you could figuratively speak about contention, somebody who's verbally assaulted or something, but this is very directly a physical assault. This person, in a physical way, you could see that this person is being drawn unto death, and you're not there to help them. Well, what good are you as a friend? Now, this really reinforces the argument from the non-Quaker Christians. You know, the Quakers were notoriously, you can't carry weapons, and you can't fight, and you can't do anything. They were pacifists. Well, that's clearly not the emphasis of passages like this in the Proverbs. Like, what kind of a friend are you if you're not strong enough to help and defend them when things get tough? Verse 12, if thou sayest, behold, we knew it not. Doth not he that pondereth the heart consider it? And he that keepeth thy soul, doth he not know it? And shall not he render every man according to his works? What did I do? I just wasn't there to defend somebody who needed defense. You have to answer to God for that. I mean, that's a massively powerful passage, that when you have somebody who's counting on you for defense, and you don't defend them in a time when they're the innocent victim and need your defense, you have to answer to God for that. I mean, that goes to parents for their children. That goes to, our security officer for our church. That goes to when you have people relying on you, and that's not just physical defense, but I think it's clearly most applicable to physical defense. It's very physical words. If they're drawn to death, if they're in their blood, meaning they're those that are, verse 11, if thou forbear to deliver them that are drawn unto death, and those that are ready to be slain. Excuse me, it's not the blood here in this verse, it's ready to be slain. They're about to be killed. So you have a figurative application to like contention and just fighting in words and back and forth, but a direct application to that physical danger. Yeah, absolutely.
They see their own body and soul as being the most important thing, that they'll be forgiven if they run away from that fight and allow somebody to die.
Yeah, that is a powerful, powerful point, and a great commentary on what we're dealing with as a society, because as a society, we're being told to be selfish. Like, be selfish. It's all about you. Believe in yourself. Take care of yourself. Pamper yourself. Whatever. It's all about you. And just as a side note, anyone who's noticed how terrible it's the film industry is, not just in the evil stuff that they put out, which they've been doing for some time, but it's just not good. It's just not entertaining anymore. And the reason is because they've gotten rid of sacrifice. I mean, that was the old stories. If you'd read old books, and these people would the hero would sacrifice himself for other people, and that self-sacrificial attitude was the thing that made us, revere and honor great heroes in ancient literature. And today that's completely gone, because we don't have the concept of sacrifice. Everyone else should sacrifice for me. I'm the one who the world revolves around. No, I shouldn't be sacrificing me. I'm the center of the planet, So that's an excellent observation.
And if you don't understand the sacrifice that Jesus made for us, you're not going to understand making that for somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's our model, right? He is, we are to do as he did. As a matter of fact, see if I can find it very quickly. I would be able to find it faster if my wife hadn't taken my phone, where I have my search feature. But no, I'm pretty sure it's in. I'm pretty sure it's in 1 Peter 2. I'll read this to you. It's verse 21. For even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that ye should follow in his steps. The principle of the Bible that we are to be like Jesus is primarily applied in the New Testament as it relates to Christ's suffering. Because he suffered for us, why shouldn't we be willing to suffer to do whatever it pleases him? And it goes on to apply it to a woman who is married to a husband who's not a believer. And it makes that application like, if Christ was able to submit himself to the cross for you, can you try to make it work with your husband if you possibly can? And it's just so contrary to the world today, right? The world today says, well, I'm not being treated up here, so I'm going to get out of here because everything is about how I'm treated and how well, pampered I am. Where the scriptures are, no. Be like Christ. Be willing to sacrifice yourself for what is right and for what is good. Yeah. Let's do one or two more. We'll see. Let's go to chapter. Here you go. Chapter 27. Actually, 27 is a really neat. It's almost like the friend chapter of Proverbs. And again, between chapters 10 and 29 of Proverbs, you have individual proverbs, but often you'll find that the person compiling them, who some people say it may have been Ezra, when they came back after the Babylonian captivity and everything. But whoever it was that compiled them, sometimes you can see how he puts them together in an order that seemed to be on purpose grouped together. And you'll see a lot of mentions of friendship in Proverbs 27. Just an interesting side note. But let's look at verse 6, which says, faithful. Well, let's just back up to verse 5, because though it's a different proverb, it's very similar. Open rebuke is better than secret love. So we get this idea that it's better to just go ahead and rebuke someone openly because there's a benefit in that. There can be a benefit in rebuking a person. That doesn't have to do with defense. It's just interesting in this context of the friendship passage. And then verse 6, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. So here's an enemy who comes up and kisses, right? So the idea is they're making nice. They're pretend. Yes, Judas is of course, the ultimate example of this. You stole it from me, Peter. I can't believe you did. But no, the kisses of somebody who pretends to be a friend, and so they're treating you well. It would be better for them to be a genuine friend and treat you poorly, because a friend sometimes isn't going to be kissing you. A friend sometimes isn't going to be saying great things about you. A true friend, sometimes is going to wound you. But faithful are the wounds of a friend, meaning he's going to say to you, hey, look, this is wrong. And because I love you and I care about you, this has to be corrected. So here's the wounds of a friend. You could almost put this in both categories. The defense category, because he's really helping you. He's, in a sense, defending you against others who'll come out and actually attack you over it. And he's coming and faithfully wounding you. Or you could see it in the context of the discipline section, where there's a contention here that's helping you grow and be disciplined better. So this could really go into either. It just happened to fall into this one in my notes. But here's the friend that's wounding faithfully. And I'll give you one more and then we'll get your comments because it's in the same chapter. Verse 17 of the same chapter in Proverbs says, iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. You know, back in those days, you'd have iron. What do they call that wheel, that spinning wheel? Whatever. Yeah, like a grinder, right? And then they sharpened the, sometimes it would be a stone, sometimes they would use iron to actually sharpen the iron. And the idea is that to sharpen a sword, you would have to, you would need some contention, right? It would need to have some violence done to the sword, but it would sharpen the sword. And that's the principle here, that a man sometimes sharpens the countenance of his friend by a little bit of contention, a little bit of heat, a little bit of friction, a little bit of back and forth. This is, by the way, this is one of the reasons why we have men's and ladies Sunday school classes, so that the men can just be men. Because sometimes it can be pretty offensive to women, the way that men talk to each other, because women would think, well, that was really rude, you shouldn't have said that. And the men are less like, yeah, but he's a man, he can take it. But men kind of naturally do that. We sort of sharpen each other. And you can always tell a boy that was raised up by maybe his dad wasn't in the house and he ended up spending a lot of time around women. The first time he spends time around men, just alone with, he's just like, oh, I don't know what's going on here, because men tend to do that. But that's a positive thing. There's a positive element to a friend just being like Luke telling me my tie's always crooked. Okay, it's a positive thing, And he doesn't say just like, hey, like maybe you can. He's like, look, your tie's always crooked. Why is it always crooked? That's good. I need that. So there are things that need to be said, and sometimes a little contention helps make that thing be said better. And I think there's a message here, at least for both sides of this, where when we have even a disagreement about something, we can still sharpen each other. We don't have to run away from disagreements, run away from things that we think will offend. We just have to be careful to use those instances as sharpening tools rather than using them as wounding tools, right? We're not there to hurt the other person. We're there to sharpen each other. And this is why often I try to often say, when I'm dealing with a subject that I know there might be some some disagreement among our church body about the subject that I'm teaching on, I'll try to say something, and sometimes I forget, but I mean to say something like, look, if you disagree, just take this and think about it, and go on disagreeing if you want to, because there are some things that we can sharpen each other with. We can go ahead and disagree and actually become sharper on the whole because we disagree. And that's fine. And we don't need to make them into things that actually destroy us and tear us apart. Rather, we can be true friends by actually having that abrasive part of our relationship, something that we're not running away from. I think that's good.
Well, just I think along the lines of sharpening each other is, and seeing each other's point of view. A lot of times you get more out of that by seeing things in a different light, or seeing things from somebody else's point of view, or being able to look at something differently.
That's a great point, because when we learn to accept rebuke, even if we disagree with it, if someone comes and says to me, hey, you're doing this wrong, and I disagree with them, it's still a valuable thing that they shared with me, because now I know what they're thinking that I didn't know before. And it will help me because I need to know what they're thinking, So we don't have to agree about everything to find value in having different opinions. Like, having different perspectives and points of view can be a very valuable thing, unless they're never shared. Unless you just keep them to yourself. And then it's not a valuable thing at all to have a different perspective. Yeah.
To go along with that line of thinking, another thing to keep in mind is when you are, iron sharpeneth iron, admonishing a brother, there's also very precise manners in which to do so. You don't sharpen a sword with a hammer. You use a whetstone and at a precise angle, slowly, patiently sharpen the blade.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a precise thing, because it could damage the blade versus actually sharpening it. Iron doesn't always sharpen iron, right? They say, I don't know if this is true, but they say, those swords, if you're fighting with a sword, you don't just, the sharp end of the sword, you don't block a blow with the sharp end of the sword like they do in the movies. You're supposed to turn the sword sideways so the flat end of the sword blocks it, because otherwise you're going to dull your blade by hitting it on the sharp end of another sword. And so a lot of times iron dulls iron, but it can sharpen iron. And so you have both of those going on, so it's important how we approach that. And again, I think a lot of it goes to motives. What is the reason that you're saying this thing to this person? Is it because they need it and you can grow together in this disagreement or whatever? Or are you doing it because you want to be right and show them that they're wrong? So those are very different motives. And I think if you just have the motive right, it often just spills out in the way that you handle it. Yes, we need to think about how we handle it, but if we spend more time thinking about what is truly in our hearts, whether or not it's the right motive, I think it will just naturally produce a lot of the right character in how we handle it. And this is so helpful in a church because we have all kinds of different people, right? And we're a family, but that doesn't mean we don't say things that later we walk away and say, that was stupid, why did I say that? I bet I just offended them. And then the person walked away saying, oh, that was really nice, and then the reverse, you say something to someone, you're like, I think I just encouraged that person. The person's like, I can't believe they think that about me, So we have to really give each other grace in those things. Okay, so just to let you know, so next week we've got a couple more here in this vein of defense. But you've seen that even the ones in the defense, you can see how it kind of dovetails with discipline, where helping someone grow is sometimes the way that you're defending them, right? But so next week we'll get a little bit further into the defense, and then we'll do a few more verses into the discipline, where we start talking about how sometimes it's right to bring some abrasiveness in order to help a person grow and become better than what they are. Sometimes it's actual straight up things like, he that spareth the rod, or hey, somebody who disobeys the law is going to have the rod, it's like a actual physical sort of violence that protects them from a greater violence if they keep continuing down the path that they're on. So we'll talk about when that's appropriate according to the Proverbs and when it's not. So that'll be our goal. All right, let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for the wisdom that we've been able to dip our toes into this afternoon. I pray that you'd help us as we continue to let these truths sit on our minds and on our hearts. May we truly apply them to our lives and begin to be more and more just wise in the manner that we conduct ourselves. I thank you for your omniscience, that you, in your love and kindness and wonderful wisdom, saw that we would need a book like this to help us with practical application of the principles that please you into our everyday lives. I pray that now that we go and do just that, we apply these things to our lives and go out and live a life that is more pleasing to thee. We pray these things in Jesus' name.